good morning, folks. For those of you who are online this morning and watching our life group lesson, I just want to say welcome and thank you for being here with us online. Just a brief lesson again this morning. We're still in the book of Isaiah. We're going to be here for the next several weeks. Isaiah is a big book. It takes a while to get through, but a lot of great stuff in there. And this morning we're going to be looking in Isaiah 6. Very familiar passage, very familiar verses, um, preached at many commissioning services for and ordination services for ministers and missionaries. But this morning we're going to look at that. We're going to be looking at all the way down through, I believe, verse 13. Let me double check that real quick. Yes, down through verse 13. So let me read through that passage here, and we'll get started here. It says, "In the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a high and lofty throne, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphim were standing above him. They each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called to another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of armies. His glory fills the whole earth. The foundations of the doorways shook at the sound of their voices, and the temple was filled with smoke. Then I said, Woe to me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips, and live among a people of unclean lips, because my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of armies. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, and in his hand was a glowing coal that he had taken from the altar with tongs. He touched my mouth with it and said, Now that this has touched your lips, your iniquity is removed, and your sin is atoned for. Then I heard the voice of the Lord asking, Who should I send? Who will go for us? And I said, Here I am, send me. He replied, Go, say to these people, Keep listening, but do not understand. Keep looking, but do not perceive. Make the minds of these people dull. Deafen their ears and blind their eyes, otherwise they might see with their eyes, excuse me, and hear with their ears, and understand with their minds, and turn back and be healed. Then I said, Until when, Lord? And he replied, Until cities lie in ruins, without inhabitants, houses are without people, the land is ruined and desolate, and the Lord drives people far away, leaving great emptiness in the land. Though a tenth will remain in the land, it will be burned again. Like the terebinth and the oak that leaves a stump when felled, the holy seed is the stump." There are several things that we see here. Um, just right off the bat, we see a picture of the Lord's power, a picture of the Lord's holiness, a picture of His greatness. When we think about and there's a lot in this that we won't spend the time to go all the way through, but this is the only spot that seraphim are mentioned specifically in the Bible, and there's some debate about whether seraphim is just another word for cherubim and all. And I don't believe so. I believe they're a specific creation of the Lord for a specific purpose, different from the cherubim. But you see things like the hem of his garment fills the temple. I mean, it's so the greatness of the Lord, the power of the Lord, the holiness of God is very much on display here in this vision that Isaiah is having. And Isaiah is worried. I mean, um, he's thinking back to what Moses had said about, and what Moses was told by God, that no man can see me. And he's saying, here I am. I'm undone. I'm a sinful man. But we'll get to that in just a moment here. But the glory of God is on display here. The manifestation of His presence is on display here. Um, and what it does is it motivates Isaiah here to a point of worship. It moves him to a point of saying, uh, I am undone. I am unclean. I recognize who I am in relation to who He is. Um, have you ever been in a situation like that where your smallness becomes very evident. We like to think we're a big deal sometimes, and no matter how great one may be in this world or in other people's eyes or in their own eyes, uh, we are very small. We can go out to the mountains in Colorado and when you're out there and you see and you realize how big creation is. Whenever you get into a large crowd of people, I mean a real massive group of people, and you realize how many how small you are. I mean, we hear numbers about the world population, and we hear numbers about how many millions of people are in the country, and all this, but we have excuse me, we have trouble grasping what that really is, and grasping the enormity of that. Isaiah here grasped the enormity of the situation he was in. He was getting the full picture of who God is and how small Isaiah really was in this situation. God was revealing himself to Isaiah, and that was motivating Isaiah, moving him to a point of worship. Has God ever revealed himself to you, whether it's out in his creation, God just speaking into your heart and letting you know, hey, I'm the creator of all of this. Maybe it's as you study his word, God begins to speak into your heart and moves you and shows you something in his word that you had missed before. And when those moments happen, when we encounter God, truly encounter God, we have to be changed. If we say we encounter God, if somebody says that they have encountered God, that they have um, heard from God, I'll use that term. But if they say that God has revealed Himself to them, whether it's through His Word or in some other situation, and they don't have a life change, then they did not encounter the real living God. I truly believe that, because if you encounter the living God, your life will be changed. I know mine has been, and doesn't mean that I don't stray or that I don't still. It's not about moving to this idea of sinless perfection. It's about this idea that an encounter with God changed my life, changed your life if you have had a true encounter with Him. So Isaiah, we see that he's had that. Um, uh, he's had that experience here, and then he moves on, and uh, from not just seeing, okay, this is who God is, but again, recognizing how small He is, recognizing how unworthy He is. Um, the more he recognized the glory of God, the more he recognized his own sinfulness. Um, he became undone. He acknowledged his sin. Um, he acknowledged that confession of that sin was the only way that he could continue where he was, to continue to move forward. So it was an immediate examination. It was an immediate. We have these times, whether it's on a Sunday morning during the invitation, whether it's a time during your quiet time. We have these times when we need to be confessing our sin. And too often we are very general. God, forgive me of my sins. Well, yeah, but what? Isaiah came to a point here of, and he doesn't list them out, but he came to a point here of being extremely aware of not only his sin, but the sins of those around him. And so, as he instantly examined himself, he came to the point of knowing that he was not worthy to stand in the presence of God. He was not worthy uh, to to be where he was. But then he hears God speak. As we go through this passage, we've gone through um, verses 1 through 5 here, or 1 through 7 rather, and God hasn't spoken yet. It's not until we get here in verse 8 that we see God speak. And that just speaks to his majesty. That speaks to his power and his glory of all of this that Isaiah was experiencing, all of the recognition of his own sin and the realization of his shortcomings in his own life came as a result of just recognizing God. It was before God ever spoke. Then whenever God does speak, it moves Isaiah even more. Um, he hears God say, "Who will go for us? Who can we send? Who will go? Who can I send? Who will go for us?" Great picture of the Trinity there. But the first thing is that having a relationship with God is essential to hearing from Him. You know, I'm sure that you've heard the same thing. I know I have somebody talking about, I think God's telling me to do thus and so. Yet they have no relationship with God through Jesus Christ. They have, um, they they have not come to that point of confessing and giving their life to Christ and therefore becoming a child of His before they begin to say, well, I pray a lot. Okay, good. But who are you praying to? Are you a child of God yet? Have you come to that point of salvation in Jesus Christ? Until that time, there's really nothing for them to respond to. Until the first response of an individual to God is to salvation. Once that relationship is established, then we can begin to hear from God. Then we can begin to, through that relationship and through that fellowship that Pastor Jeff has preached about over the last few weeks, that because of that, then we can begin to hear from God and then respond to Him on what He has for us to do. Um, what's what what what's striking to me is God says, "Who will go for us?" And Isaiah's response is immediate. Isaiah doesn't say, "Hey, well, Lord, let me go home and pray about it." He's already talking to the one he's going to be praying to about it anyway. But hey, let me go think about it. Let me talk to my family. Let me see what they say. Let me make a pros and cons list and see if this is where you want me to go or what you want me to do. Now, Isaiah, whenever God spoke, Isaiah responded immediately. Um, he didn't have to know the details. He didn't have to, again, lay out the whole plan. He said, God wants somebody to go. I'll go. I will do that. And he did so willingly. Um, Moving on, he said, um, so how do I go? What do I say? And God gives him the message to proclaim. Now that message seems kind of cruel at first, when we say, God's saying, well, they're going to hear, but they're not going to understand, and all this. What he's saying, what God's telling Isaiah is, no matter what you preach, these people are are going to be stiff-necked. They're going to be, they're not going to understand. But that's not your responsibility, Isaiah. Your responsibility is to go. Your responsibility is to tell them, and that is what God tells us to do today as well. Our responsibility is to share the gospel, to tell people about the good news of Jesus Christ. Yes, we want as many saved as we can possibly get saved, but we can't save them. Our responsibility is just to tell them. And so take encouragement from that God's messengers, that's us, those who believe in Christ, we are His messengers. We are to be faithful to His call. We're to be faithful about sharing His message, regardless of the outcome, regardless of the responses that that others may have. towards us, but ultimately it's not towards us, it's towards God. Their rejection of us would be a rejection of God and his offer of salvation. In Isaiah's time, it was a time of when judgment was going to be coming, and God's saying, "Look, I want you to spread this message. I want you to tell the people so that they know and they are without excuse whenever judgment does come their way, and judgment will come, but." Through that judgment, God is going to purify His people. Through that judgment, as Judah is conquered and taken into exile, we see that with what Isaiah is prophesying. We see that with Jeremiah, and it was a time of purification for the people of God, as it was a tremendously difficult time, but it was for the betterment of God's people, because God always seeks to rebuild, restore, and redeem us. Sometimes it's painful, sometimes the process is difficult, but that is what He seeks to do in your life and in my life. Been very quick today. I thank you for joining us this morning. Um, Maybe a little different look than what we're used to. We hear Isaiah 6 again. Isaiah 6 gets preached at a lot of commissioning services, but today I want to take just a little different look at it. So, thank you for being with us. Worship service will start soon, and if you're not able to be here this morning, it'll be back here online, and we just hope and pray that you can join us with that. So, God bless you, and we look forward to seeing you again in person very soon.